Fantastic. So thanks.
Just as a reminder, sorry, if you like, as you've just heard, Erin's going to be recording the meeting. So if you'd rather not be in the recording, if you just would turn your video off, that means you just won't be part of the video, just kind of as an opportunity to opt out now.
Great. Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, so thanks for coming everyone today. Some new faces that haven't been to any as well, so glad to have you here. We're going to really talk you through, introduce our new team member to you today, talk you through some of the insights that we've been gaining in Neath so far in the first few weeks of being there. Talk you through, introduce you to the president of the South Wales, and then talk you through the next steps in Nelson, final location in Cornwall, and then take some questions from if that's okay. So first up, just really excited to introduce you to Bethan, who is our newest team member. We had a really strong pool of applicants in Neath, as strong as I've seen in many years of Red Cross. Andrew, who's one of our candidates today, really strong team, and Bethan we're really glad to have on board. And Bethan's going to have a couple of minutes now to talk to you about herself and how she's been here.
Well, thank you, Erin. First of all, I would just like to say how happy I am really to be appointed as Innovation Officer in Neath. I'm extremely proud to say that I will be working with the Red Cross. The Red Cross is an organisation, charity that I've got utmost respect for, so I'm just wanted to start by saying that I'm extremely grateful and really looking forward to the opportunity of working closely with the Red Cross over the next few months. I'll explain a little bit about myself. I live within the Neath Talbot area and have done so all my life. I graduated from university in 2015. Following that, I did a little bit of work for SOC, which is Channel Pedwar Cymru, working on programmes such as Hip Neu Skip, which is kind of like the Welsh versions of DIY SOS. So that was my first work within community and seeing how community projects were coming together. Following that, I did the work within the media before being appointed then to work as a schools project officer for Cynon Valley Crime Prevention. In this role, I was working very closely with the police and school liaison officers and teachers, working with children then to identify what kind of local issues there were. And what we would do then is work with the children and sort of work on projects that would combat these community issues. So that was my sort of initial sort of experience of project work. I was invited then to go out to South Africa to work on a project with the church where we were going into the townships which had populations of around 12 million and working closely with their communities to ultimately with the end goal of building a school. That was done and it's an ongoing project. I brought that experience back with me then to Port Talbot, where I'm living now. And I applied for a job with the Presbyterian Church of Wales, where I worked for 6 years. When I initially started, I was given a blank canvas and I did my mapping exercise within the area and quickly found that the area was in desperate need of a food bank. So I went off and established the food bank. It took 9 months of building. I made sure the project had a very big launch where I invited the media, a local celebrity to open the food bank. Local MPs were invited and it really was a huge launch. Because it was launched so well, there was a lot of community interest. So I was working on a daily basis with schools, rugby clubs, football clubs, you name it, people were getting involved, either to support, or of course a lot of people actually needed that service as well. And to date it's supported way over 10,000 people. From that, other things developed, the needs were, they were there, so obviously I needed to set up a homeless drop-in it was quite obvious that one of those were needed. So I went on and set up a homeless drop-in, which then developed into other people wanting to use that service, such as people who were experiencing loneliness and isolation. Again, other projects developed, like a Christmas community dinner, which was attended by over 70 local people and was supported by the local mayor and the leader of the council, which I have great relationships with. My aim for that project, I developed and managed it for 5 years, was for it to become volunteer-led. And that's where the food bank sits now. It's a volunteer-led project which is doing wonders within Talbot. And I always like to stress that the handing out the food is just the bare basics. The people that came to the chapel where it was launched needed far more than just food. That was their basic need. There were a lot of other needs like mental health issues, drugs and alcohol abuse, lots of other problems are coming with it as well. My latest post was working for Neath Community Trust. The Neath is an area within Neath, it's a private area. But unfortunately with that role, I commenced in the February. As you all know, the pandemic it hit shortly after that. So then I became furloughed. And as I became furloughed, I became very frustrated because I'm quite an active person. So I've left that role and I'm happy now to be working with the Red Cross to see what we can develop within Neath. I'm very excited about that. And I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Bethan. Maybe we can keep the questions for just after the show and tell, just to make sure that like people can just get the main information, and then we can stay as long as you want for questions. It's going to be a very busy session, definitely. So just to introduce kind of quickly where we are in the whole project, we recently started the discovery stage. We've done 2 weeks of intense interviews in Neath. So we've done, I think, close to 30 interviews, and that was from members of the community, people from the voluntary sector, people from the local council, public sector. So yeah, we've tried to speak to as diverse range of people as possible. And the next 2 weeks, we're going to spend them focusing on interviews in Nelson. And just for people that are new to this show and tells, our main aim of this project is to engage and understand the strengths and needs of communities in high-risk, low-resource places. And now we're just going to present you some of the strengths and needs of the area of Neath. So how we've been doing the research, like I said, we've done a lot of interviews. They've all been one-to-one interviews. And also it's very important to mention that considering we are doing them remotely, it was a massive challenge to reach out to people, as well as to try to engage people that are not on social media, people that are not kind of like digitally savvy, or people that just don't want to really we're not comfortable using a computer for these videos, which is why we've done telephone interviews, we've done WhatsApp interviews, we've done interviews over Zoom, just any kind of media platform that's available. And we're looking forward to kind of like introducing new ways to engaging with people as well. And after the interviews, we've been capturing lots of insights and grouping those insights in order to see kind of like teams emerging. We've been doing all of this on Miro. You can see like a very, very small snapshot on the right. I promise you the board is absolutely massive, and we're adapting it every single day. We had interviews until last evening. So yeah, this has been changing every single day. We'll continue to change it as well. Have some interviews tomorrow and more interviews to follow in the next few weeks. So the insights we're going to present you now are more like teams that we built based on calls that we've got from people, and just different observations. But yeah, please bear in mind, this is going to continue changing as we build on this. So some of the main strengths we identified in Neath from speaking to members of the community, probably the main one have been like lots of physical strengths, like almost everybody mentioned like the amazing surroundings. We even got like screenshots from people like showing us through the window. Everybody said the nature is absolutely amazing. People mentioned that they live like very close to waterfalls, as well as like close to beach, lots of parks as well. Just everybody was like very proud of the nature surrounding Neath, as well as some heritage and historic places. And this is something that they all believe should be capitalized on, especially in times like now, where most of the other places to kind of like meet are all closed down. People have been depending a lot on having like these outdoor places. Other kind of like physical strengths and locations, people mentioned like stuff like the market and festivals and lots of like community events that kind of bring people together. And they said this is probably like their favorite times of the year, is just when there are all these community events where they can all get together. As well as probably the favorite thing of the town center was all the independent shops. So yeah, they just thought this kind of like brings uniqueness to the town and kind of like distinguishes from areas like bigger areas surrounding like Swansea, for example. In terms of community strengths, again, everybody was saying how friendly everyone is. Most people were saying how they definitely can depend on their neighbor, and like especially during COVID, they had like strangers just knocking on their door asking if they need help. Yeah, everybody was willing to help out. And another thing that we kind of established is that Neath is not just one community, it's kind of multiple communities gathered together. We definitely saw different trends emerging in the different areas of Neath, which was quite interesting, and we are definitely looking to explore this more. Some areas were definitely more involved than others, but almost all of them have lots of kind of community programs, community clubs. And in general, like the community spirit is very, very high. And other trends that have arisen during COVID, I've already mentioned some of them, but yeah, some of the others that we've had is local businesses being very innovative in order to like adapt to the like meeting the new demand. Also, street champions is something that a lot of people mentioned. Apparently, a lot of the areas kind of got together and organized, and people just kind of like step forward to volunteer to be a street champion, which meant that if anybody on the street needed anything, where it's like food support or any other support, they'll just kind of like try to help with this. And they had like multiple other activities like distributing food, organizing food banks. We heard a lot about like birthdays being celebrated on the street, everybody going on the front yard, and people like volunteering to sing and perform for everyone. So yeah, they definitely said that events like COVID definitely brought the community closer together than further apart, which was just amazing to hear. And this is just one of the quotes we got. We have so many, but answering the question of what makes you proud to live in Neath, at least one thing, this is kind of what we got. A lot of people said even if they got the chance, they wouldn't move away because of the community feel about the place. And just moving on to the needs, again, there are like lots of strengths in the community, but also there are things that members of the community thought could be improved. Some of them are awareness of services. We noticed that if we speak to people that are like very involved, like in the voluntary sector, in public sector, they're mostly aware of the services available. They told us there are pretty much services for everyone. However, people that are not as involved, in most cases, didn't know about them. So it's just how can we make people aware of what's already there and just make sure that this information reaches everyone. And that brings us to the next point, which is digital exclusion. Lots of the groups that formed during COVID as well were predominantly online. And if people are on social media and they're part of these online groups, they felt like they're part of the community. However, for lots of the people that were digitally excluded, they didn't feel as close to the community. Some of them felt quite isolated. And apart from like random interactions with some of the neighbors, a lot of them will just experience a lot of loneliness, which again brings us to mental health support, even though there is a lot of services to offer mental health support in the area, and some kind of volunteer organizations that were befriending calls and everything. We've been told that there is a much higher demand than these services can offer currently, which again is understandable with the current situation, but this is something that they definitely thought could be increased in Neath. Another one is confidence building and need for job stability. We had a lot of mentions of how there are not many opportunities for young people, even engagement for like teenagers and kids and young people graduating college. We had lots of quotes saying that lots of people graduate the local college, but then they wouldn't be able to do anything with their degree in the local area, which they found is quite demotivating for young people. Another one is town center regeneration. A lot of people felt it's definitely needed. Most of the opinions were that town center was a very vibrant place. It was a great place to go to, kind of like about 10 years ago, and probably since then it's kind of started declining. A lot of shops started closing down, and people found like less and less opportunities and kind of like motivation to go there and meet. It's still a place where people can go and meet. It's just not as vibrant as it used to be. And a lot of people thought that if the town center goes through like some improvements, then the community will be like stronger together, will have a place to meet. And probably the last issue has been increasing homelessness. There are services tackling this, there are services supporting these people. However, there has been a lot of tension from some community members. They were saying that they don't want to like take their kids to the town center, and that this has been increasing a lot and the demand has not been met yet. So yeah, it's just about finding ways to support everyone within the community. And these are some of the quotes we got in terms of the needs. The first one is addressing the need for more services for young people. People who have been kind of like born and like have their whole lives in need were saying how when they used to be kids, when they used to be teenagers, they used to be these community centers where they would go after school. They had lots of activities there, but they were saying there is not much now for the kids to do. And then the other one is about digital exclusion, kind of people who either don't have access to the internet or maybe choose not to be on social media. They don't tend to learn about these community activities. So it's just how do you make sure that whatever services the community offers, it can reach everyone and everybody can feel part of the community, even if they're not on social media. And oh yeah, I didn't miss anything. And yeah, now I'm going to pass to Charlotte to run you through the community dynamics.
Thanks, Monica. So Monica's touched on a couple of things already in terms of the community dynamics we've learned about. One of the biggest ones that stood out to us is alongside everyone clearly being so friendly and community spirit minded and have really stepped forward in terms of like whenever the need, everyone said they really rallied. What was really interesting is that it seems like despite Neath being a small town, it's actually several regions that kind of see themselves almost very differently. There's Kimler, there's Neath Abbey, there's Cadoxton, there's all these different places, and they all see themselves very differently. And also what you get is very different depending on where you live in Neath. And someone almost described it as it's almost tribal the way that it is here, which is really interesting for us. And the other thing to kind of bring into it, which is we've got to gather all these strengths and insights, but they're not isolated. It's all really linked, and it's very much an ecosystem. We're really seeing that. For example, the lack of confidence or the increased levels of drugs and homelessness seems to be really linked from the conversations we've been having to the fact that before the steel industry was a really long-term employer. Now they've gone from long-term employment of life jobs to 0 hours contract, and that's really changed the dynamic of the work. There's also not the activities for the youth, which is leading to different things. There's been a high street decline, there's been a number of different things, and to look at any of these things in isolation almost would mean that we're like it wouldn't be the right way to address these problems, because you can't just address one of them. It's really interlinked, and we've got to have that awareness in what we're doing. One of the interviews we had mentioned that she offers a homeless service, and they actually just provide food. But the thing is that the food isn't the means to the end, and that's not the one thing they offer. But what the food does is it helps them build those relationships. So people come to the food van, they're offered food, and whilst they're there, they have a conversation, those relationships and support grows, and that's how we can create long-term change. And that was really interesting for us to kind of elaborate on. We've also learned a lot about how to build local volunteering. And there's a load of points on this slide, and I can just really quickly whiz through them. But formal volunteering had a really interesting perception. People didn't see themselves as volunteers, even though they were really active community champions, community members. And the formality of volunteering, people often said, was the barrier to getting involved in the first place. Local people want to help local causes. They want to get involved locally to help the place they live. Variety is also key. When you're having these activities, interacting with people who have interest in all these different areas is really important to building that long-lasting community group. Community groups, they also, what was fascinating was hearing that sometimes some of the larger organizations or the council just planted a seed and then the community grew it. So they only needed to create these few relationships, and next thing you know, it grown and grown and grown and grown. And we saw that through COVID as well, because what people were saying is this support champions and street champions that were put in place at the beginning, and where everyone was kind of learning each other's needs and kind of building those support networks. They were saying in the second wave, in the second lockdown, they've hardly been asked upon. But when they've explored that more, it's not because they haven't been needed, it's because we've already instilled those relationships. So actually, by having the things like planted at the beginning, it's meant that people have grown and people no longer have as many challenges as they did before. And hopefully, as we've seen, this isn't just COVID related, these are lasting relationships. And also, people don't just come to volunteer to help out, they also come for the community they get when they get there. That's been a really clear thing, something that we've seen through one of the organizations called FAN Alliance. It's a community itself, and how they bring people in is they get around the barrier of, I don't know whether I want to volunteer, by holding events, bringing people in, getting them involved in the community, and then they even kind of quoted, they just adopt people. People want to stay, people want to get involved. So it was a really interesting way to kind of build that local volunteering space. And also just the role of community champions is so key in everything that we've been exploring, whether that's on street champions, whether that's people who want to change the community, whether that's people who just care about Neath. But they're having these people involved in any community activity is clearly a make or break moment for how an organization can work. So this is a really great quote for how of the kind of person you'd want as a community champion. You want people who are self-motivated in the fact that they're building their own world. And that really stuck with us.
Thanks, Charlotte. So obviously, Charlotte, Monica and I, none of us are from Neath, Nelson, or the third location we're about to tell you about. So we had to find a way to start making some local contacts at the very early stage in our scoping part of the project. First port of call, we went to Eleanor and spoke to Eleanor and found the contact details of the local presidents. And Jay should be with us here now to tell us about how he's helped feed into the work and really helped us establish some of those local links early on in the work.
Hi, thanks, Aaron. So I've got 3 things written down. Who am I? What did I do? And a little bit of advice about how to engage with presidents. But I know Eleanor's on the line, so she might want to jump on. And Alicia's on the line, I think, too, so she might want to jump on. So who am I? My name's Jay Dave. I'm a retired police boss. I retired 2 years ago, and I'm the grandly titled President for South Wales. But basically, I'm a volunteer. My specialism in policing is in emergency planning. So when Aaron went to Eleanor and Eleanor came to me and said, would you like to get involved in this? My answer generally is always yes, because I find it interesting work. You know, I'm a volunteer. Everything the 3 of you have said already resonates with me. It's the end of my area. Neath is just beyond. I've been there a couple of times in my policing service. I recognise some of the things you've said about strengths and challenges in that area, but it's not somewhere I live and it's not somewhere I go to a lot. So the first thing was that I had to sort of say is that I don't know that area, but because of my police force extending into it, my old police force, I can get you contacts. So I talked to Aaron about my old culture style of one of the suggestions I had was old style snail mail letters are really rare, particularly to bosses. So if you want to engage key stakeholders like police bosses, fire bosses, ambulance managers, NHS trust managers, weirdly, a nice bit of Conqueror paper with our letterhead saying what you want and what the project's about, going down the food chain with the initials of the various managers landing at the right place shows the support of the hierarchy. Now, Aaron was really interested, but that went into the system of thought for the project, and it wasn't used. I don't mind that at all. It stimulates thought. It's just one of my ideas. Another idea was, well, I don't know the area, but it fits with what I will call a neighborhood policing sergeant's role. So I was able to make contacts and find that relevant sergeant who spoke to Aaron, and then engaged other people who would be stakeholders that sergeant would know, that could be introduced to the team. And I believe some of the interviews were about that.
Jay, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Really sorry, Jay, just to give you like a 20-second warning, because we've still got to get through a couple more slides. And we're running out of time, sorry.
And the last thing I suppose I did was to support the recruitment process that Aaron was able to tell me about, both by tweeting it or retweeting it, and on LinkedIn, where I don't think we're that visible. So I'll probably stop there.
Great, thanks so much, Jay. And sorry to rush you. We've obviously had a really full session today, but it is really great, and thanks so much for your help. Yeah, so now just take you through really to the final part of today's, which is around our third location, which we didn't originally envisage being able to have. So it's really, really great that we've been able to get it on board. We're going to be working with the communities in Camborne, Poole and Redroof, and this is in no small part down to some really great and tenacious work from Helen Sipthorpe, who's helped us access the funding to employ a third, effectively Bethan, down into this area. So we chose this area based on the high health inequalities that it's got. It's got a really high risk of flooding, and we also spoke to some local voices. So Charlotte and Monica joined a really encouraging meeting hosted by local teams and the president of Cornwall while I was off on annual leave. I then spoke with Charlotte, who's a local community connector, about the areas we were considering. Helen and Freya had done some really, really great research into 4 different options in Cornwall that I wanted us to explore. So following those conversations and following some further research by us, those are the areas we went for. In terms of what presence we have there, we have independent living teams, some emergency response teams, and a mobility aid service that has been out of action since the beginning of COVID, that's being looked to be reinstated. Just to give you a bit more context around the area, Camborne has the highest number of people at risk of flooding in Cornwall, which has got more than 12,000 homes at risk of flooding. It's one of the highest prone areas of flooding in the country. Camborne, Poole and Redroof, 1 in 4 residents live in the 20 most deprived areas of England, which are known to have the poorest health outcomes. It's really big issues there. 14.6% of individuals are living in fuel poverty in this area as well, which has significant health consequences. So really, in terms of our causal areas, this area really spoke to us. Camborne's also recently featured heavily on a BBC documentary, Cornwall with Simon Reeve, to highlight some of the issues facing the local communities. I'm just going to copy and paste the link into the chat as well, in case you guys want to have a look at that. But yeah, those really, as I said, were the main reasons why we chose it. We're really excited to get into the area and start speaking to people. As you'll see on our next step slides in a second, one of the few next things we're going to be doing is looking at hiring, getting our vacancy up and hiring in the Cornwall vacancy. We're also midway through our recruitment process for our Nelson member of staff. We're also going to be, and Charlotte and Beth have already started, I think, mapping some of the community from Neath, and we're going to be going as of Monday into our 2-week sprint in Nelson to start our research and interviews there. So apologies, guys, that we have run slightly over. We've probably got 1 or 2 minutes for questions we can take. I don't know if anyone wants to, has any? Right, well, I'm just putting.
Sorry, no worries.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, guys. We'll have another show and tell in 2 weeks where we'll be, as I said, mainly about things we've just spoken about in terms of our next steps. But really great to see you, and we're looking forward to getting to Nelson and seeing you again in the fortnight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.